Hi, good morning, attendees. This is Sky Notestein with the South Florida Water Management District. We're going to wait another minute or so to allow people to log on. So stand by. If you're not hearing anything, that's okay. Okay, well, good morning. My name is Sky Notestein. I'm a principal scientist in the Applied Sciences Bureau here at the South Florida Water Management District. This workshop for the Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project, Rule Development Workshop number 1 is starting. Just to share how this meeting format will be conducted, this workshop will be recorded. Workshop participants will be muted during the presentations, but we will have a public comment period on our agenda, and questions will be addressed using the question and answer feature of Zoom. And when we get to the public comment period, and if you wish to provide a question or a comment, please include your name, affiliation, and if there's a relevant agenda item or speaker to address it. That'll help us in addressing your comments or questions easier. By way of today's workshop agenda, we have 7 items, and staff from various groups here at the district will present each. The water protection overview and rulemaking process will be given by Jennifer Brown. The SERP, Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project, both the background and purpose and the benefits to hydrology and wildlife will be covered by Jeff Buck. Aquifer storage and recovery component of this project will be addressed by Bob Verastro. I will do the draft rule language. The public comment will be facilitated by Natalie Kraft. I'll return for the next steps and the adjournment. And rest assured, we'll provide links during the next steps phase of this presentation for much of the information covered today. And at the conclusion of today's workshop, we will post a PDF of the presentation to our rules webpage. As I mentioned, staff from multiple divisions and working groups here at the district have participated and are participating in today's workshop. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Water Resources Division Director, Mr. Lawrence Clem, to welcome.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to today's Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project Rulemaking Workshop. As a local sponsor, the South Florida Water Management District conducts rulemaking, and this process is to protect the water that's needed for SURF projects to achieve the benefits for their success. So this process that we're going through today, it focuses specifically on developing the rule language for this specific project. And it's not the process where we would discuss various project features of the SERP project itself. Instead, we'll be rolling out the draft rule language for you to see. We are very interested in getting your feedback on that. So that is just wanted to kind of make a distinction between those two. Today is the vehicle for protecting water for this project and not the vehicle for discussing individual project features and changes that you might want to see in that project. So we thank you for being here. We're excited. We have some really good presentations for you to see this process and making sure that it's clear and transparent and that we have all the feedback we need to make this rulemaking successful. So thank you so much for being here today.
All right. Thank you for that welcome and introduction, Lawrence. Much appreciated. And with that, we're going to go on to the next agenda item. That's water protection overview and rulemaking processes by Jennifer Brown, who is with the Office of Counsel here at the district.
Good morning, everyone. As Sky noted, I'm with the Office of Counsel. I'm charged with minimum flows and levels and water reservations, as well as helping out the SERP folks. So glad to see everybody here again in virtual format. Just wanted to give you a rundown of where we are within Chapter 373 for our authority. And so one of the first statutes that we have is in Part 1 of 373. It authorizes the governing board of the Water Management District to adopt rules and implement the various parts of 373. In Part 2 of 373, the governing boards are allowed to implement a permitting program. That permitting program is designed to protect the water resources from harm. Harm has a specific definition for this water management district, and it's found in Chapter 40E8 of our rules. And the district has used various tools in its consumptive use permitting program. I don't know if anybody's participated in our lunch and learns or 101s, but one of our tools is the restricted allocation areas. And those are regionally specific rules to address a particular resource concern in the area. And those are found in section 321E of our applicant's handbook. If you can do the slide, Sky. So the overall goal of Chapter 373 is to ensure the sustainability of the water resources of the state of Florida and our jurisdiction down here in South Florida. And we do have various tools that we use. And for this particular region, you're probably familiar with quite a few of them. The Loxahatchee River has an MFL that is set at the significant harm standard. Our water use permitting is also, as I mentioned in the previous slide, designed to cause no harm. And you'll see it there laid out in our table. And then we also have water shortage designed to protect against serious harm. And so a little bit more discussion of this strategy, these tools, these definitions can be found in our regional water supply plans, as well as our rules in 40E8, the specific definitions of harm, serious harm, and severe harm are there, significant harm. Next slide. As I mentioned before, restricted allocation areas are one of our tools. They are all located in section 321 of the applicant's handbook, and that's incorporated by reference in 40E2. Again, these areas are designed to address a specific water resource concern. They might be part of an MFL recovery strategy. We might have identified insufficient water to meet projected needs of the region. And those are all discussed in the water supply plan. And so when applicants are seeking water use permits from an area that has a restricted allocation area rule, they must comply with this specific criteria as well as all other applicable criteria in the applicant's handbook in 40E2. Next slide. So this is the map many of you may have seen before. It is a map of all of the restricted allocation areas we have adopted in our district. In the Upper East Coast, we have C23, C24, and C25 canal system. And we also have restrictions on Floridan aquifer wells in Martin, St. Lucie County. In Hendry County, we have the L1, L2, L3 canal system. And we also have the Indian Prairie Canal and Lake Istapoga section in our northeastern portion of our district. Our Lake Okeechobee service area rule, which extends to multiple counties and includes the areas hydraulically connected to Lake Okeechobee. And then we have the Lower East Coast Everglades water bodies and North Palm Beach County Loxahatchee River watershed water bodies, which is the subject of this rulemaking effort. Next slide. So As the lawyer, I'm here to make sure that Sky and Natalie and that group follow some rules. All of the district rules must be consistent with the Water Resource Implementation Rule. This is a DEP rule found at 6240 that all of our rules that we adopt are judged to be in compliance with. We must follow that guidance. Also, how rules are adopted is set forth in Chapter 120 and some implementing rules in Chapter 28, Florida Administrative Code. The Department of State also has some rules, but those are primarily on form and numbering. And lastly, Governor DeSantis's Executive Order 19-12 sets some parameters for rulemaking as well. We're not to be overly burdensome. We must be efficient. We should not duplicate rules. And of particular note, in that executive order is a sunset provision. We will not be including a sunset provision in this rule. WRDA requires that we protect the water that's each CERT project needs available, and so we will be noting that. So this slide here is the key steps in the rules development process. This is essentially the process laid out in Chapter 120 that I mentioned on the previous slide. The governing board authorizes the Water Management District to publish a notice of rule development. We did that. Analyses are conducted. A technical document is developed, and I believe we have provided it. Also, rule language is developed, and that's also provided. Here we are, soliciting stakeholder input at a public workshop. Once the rule language and technical document and have incorporated all of the comments and changes have been made, the district staff goes back to the governing board and asks for authorization to publish a notice of proposed rule. The publication of the notice of proposed rule kicks off a bunch of timeframes that the district has to comply with. And once we meet those timeframes, we file a rule with the Department of State, and then the rule becomes effective 20 days later. So it's, as we mentioned, there are rule authority for developing rules that we had mentioned at the beginning of my section, but there's also this federal state integration that we are complying with in this rulemaking effort. And so before the district enters into a project cooperation agreement with the Corps, we have to do a PIR that addresses the project's economic and environmental benefits, the engineering feasibility, and other factors that are provided in the 373.1501 Florida statutes to allow sufficient to allow the district to obtain approval from DEP under section 373.026. And the PIR must identify the increase in water supply resulting from the project component, and then the additional water supply shall be allocated or reserved by the district under this chapter. And it's that last sentence that we are complying with by this rule development effort. Next slide. WRDA 2000 has corresponding language. Water made available by a project for natural system must be protected. We can use either our reservation authority or our allocation authority. Again, the PIR must identify the increase in water supplies, both for the natural system and other water-related needs, which could be water supply. And again, as I mentioned before, that protection of the water made available by the project has to be done before a project partnership agreement can be entered into between the Corps and the district. And that's how we receive the federal funding for the construction and operation of the project. So, you're going to see this effort is a really tight turnaround, and we recognize that, and we apologize for that ahead of time. But what we are trying to do is to start construction and get this project moving. And Jeff Buck who will follow up in a little bit, will provide a little bit more information about that. But that desire has really been the motivating factor of the generation of the schedule here. And so we'd like to do the project partnership agreement about fall 2022, which means we've got to give the district and Corps some time for this drafting of the project partnership agreement, a verification letter exchange between the Corps and the district. And so we really need these rules to become effective summer 2022. Next slide. So in order for the rules to become adopted summer 2022, we'll be looking at the governing board's April meeting, April 14th, 2022, for authorization to publish the notice of proposed rule. And we will ask for automatic adoption of the rule, provided there is no request for a public hearing or comment from JAPC. Which then, in order to get that ready and the rules and all the comment incorporated, we'll be looking at a second workshop, February 22nd, today's workshop of January 25th. And then it's, since we're all here today, notice of rule development, of course, had already been done. So we know it is a tight turnaround and we do apologize for that, but hopefully you'll see from the calendar why that is. Next slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. And with that, we'll go on to the next agenda item. This is the SERP Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project, the background and purpose, presented by Jeff Buck.
Thank you, Sky, and good morning, everyone. Just to reiterate, my name is Jeff Buck, project manager here at the district, and I'm going to be presenting the project background and purpose on the SERP Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project. So as we mentioned before, the Lox River project is a SERP project, and it includes 3 of the 68 SERP components. SERP was approved by Congress in the Water Resources Development Act of WRDA 2000. And the purpose of SERP is to improve and or restore the proper quantity, quality, timing, and distribution of water to roughly 2.4 million acres of the South Florida ecosystem. In addition to meeting the environmental restoration goals, SERP will also maintain the existing level of water supply and flood protection for legal users in the region, and that's per the Water Savings Clause. In order to achieve these goals, modifications to the structural and operational components of the existing Central and South Florida project, or CNSF project, will be required. Like other SERP projects, Lox River is a 50-50 partnership between the state of Florida and the federal government. In this case, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is the lead federal agency, and the district is the lead state agency. So this slide shows the boundaries of the Lox River study area as defined in the project implementation report, or PIR, which was completed in January 2020. In general, the study area is approximately 480,000 acres and is located within southern Martin County and northern Palm Beach County. For reference, the aerial image to the right shows the study area outlined in red relative to the boundary of the district, which is outlined in blue, and also relative to the historic landscape of South Florida prior to development, which is outlined in yellow. Current land use within the Lox River study area is highly urbanized to the east, but it transitions to natural areas and open land and water to the west and north. Historically, the Lox River study area was dominated by a mosaic of wetlands, uplands, and sloughs, but in the last 50 years, much of the wetland habitat was drained or impacted by ag production, urban development, or flood control as part of the CNSF project. These impacts have led to a substantial reduction in the spatial extent and function of wetlands, and that has had a negative effect and a reduction in water flows to the Lox River. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the Lox River project is to improve water flows to the northwest fork of the Lox River and to restore the hydrology and connectivity of wetlands and watersheds that form the historic headwaters of the river. 5 specific planning objectives were developed in order to achieve these goals and discussed further in detail in the project implementation or PIR report. These objectives were based on both the problems and the opportunities that were identified within the study area. I think it's important to note that these objectives were developed to be consistent with the ecological objectives of SERP. So quickly, I'll just touch on the 5 objectives, starting with the first one, which is to restore the wet and dry season flows to the northwest fork of the Loxahatchee River. Objective 2 is to restore oysters, seagrass, and other estuarine communities in the Loxahatchee River estuary. Objective 3 is to increase spatial extent and function of wetlands within the watershed. Objective 4 is to restore the watershed connections among the headwater natural areas that form the Loxahatchee River in order to improve the hydrology, sheet flow, hydroperiods, natural storage, and vegetative communities within those areas. And finally, Objective 5 is to restore the abundance and diversity of native plant and animal species in the watershed, the natural areas within the Lox River and its estuary. So the ecological objectives discussed in the previous slide will be achieved through the implementation of the authorized plan, which is alternate 5R. This slide provides an overview of the authorized plan and highlights the features or components of the plan. I think it's also important here to note that although several other restoration plan alternatives were modeled and evaluated during development of the PIR, alternate 5R was selected because it maximized restoration benefits relative to costs. So from the plan view map here, you'll notice that the project components are grouped into 3 different flowways, which are based on geographic area. Flowway 3 is located in the northern portion of the project, and it crosses the Palm Beach County, Martin County line. In general, Flowway 3 components are designed to improve water flows to the tributaries or creeks that feed the northwest fork of the river. This includes the Kitchen Creek, Moonshine Creek, and Cypress Creek. Flowway 2 is located in the western and central portion of the project area. And the main components of Flowway 2 include the C18 West Reservoir, along with the 4 co-located ASR wells. Flowway 1 is located in the southernmost portion of the project, and it includes the existing G160 and G161 structures, along with the planned restoration work for the Grassy Waters Preserve Triangle and the pump station to be constructed along the M Canal to deliver water to the, pump station along the M1 Canal to deliver water to the M Canal. In general, Flowway 1 and Flowway 2 components are designed to improve water flows to the Northwest Fork via the C18 and C18 West Canal. Next slide, please. So the authorized plan will provide hydrological and ecological benefits to the Northwest Fork of the river and the surrounding habitat while meeting the requirements of the WRDA 2000 Savings Clause, which requires that the current levels of service for flood protection and water supply be maintained for existing legal users within the project area. In terms of hydrological benefits to the Northwest Fork of the river, the project will achieve 91% of the dry season target restoration flows and 98% of the wet season target restoration flows as measured at Lanehart Dam. The metric here used to measure or define flow was based on the preferred restoration flow scenario that was developed for the in the 2006 restoration plan for the Northwest Fork of the Lox River. So meeting these target flows will promote the recovery of both freshwater and estuarine species, as increased freshwater flows limit saltwater intrusion to upstream portions of the river while maintaining salinity zones further downstream. In terms of benefits to wetlands and wetland hydrology, the Lox River project will restore roughly 27,000 acres of disturbed wetlands, 17,000 of which have been improved for agriculture, and 10,000 of which are located within existing disturbed wetlands in natural areas such as the J.W. Corbett Wildlife Management Area, Loxahatchee Slough Natural Area, the Palmar Natural Area Complex, Cypress Creek Natural Areas, West Palm Beach Water Catchment Area, and Jonathan Dickinson State Park. So these restored wetlands will connect with an additional 51,000 acres of other wetland communities in the area and will result in a a total of 78,000 acres of connected habitat that will be protected. So habitat connectivity combined with the benefits of the wetland restoration efforts I just mentioned will also contribute to the recovery of threatened and endangered animal species that are found throughout the study area, such as snail kite, eastern indigo snake, and wood stork. Project will also improve native habitat for important recreational species of fish and wildlife, such as white-tailed deer and ducks. In addition to the environmental benefits, the Lox River project will also provide outdoor recreational opportunities for the public. Public use facilities will be constructed at Moonshine Creek, the South Florida Water Management District owned Cypress Creek Natural Area, and the C18 West Reservoir. This will include parking areas, boat kayak launches, trailheads, bridges, and a fishing platform. So this slide here kind of summarizes some of the key tasks that have already been completed for the project, and it also highlights some of the outstanding tasks that remain to be completed. As far as the tasks completed, the PIR was completed in January 2020. It was signed by the Chief of Engineers in April of 2020, and then was authorized by Congress in WRDA that same year. As far as tasks currently underway for 2022, the district will continue to work on developing agreements with our local partners. We'll initiate preliminary engineering activities in Flowway 3, and we'll continue to work with the Army Corps to finalize the 2021 Integrated Delivery Schedule, or IDS schedule, which reflects the design and construction of the schedule for the project. Perhaps the most critical task here remaining is to complete the RAA rulemaking effort, because moving forward, this step is critical in executing the project partner agreement with the Corps, and it's contingent upon the rulemaking effort that we're discussing here today. In terms of our timeline, the goal is to complete the rulemaking effort by summer 2022, as Sky mentioned, and execute the PPA by late summer or early fall of this year. Next slide, please. So this brings me to my final slide, which is a snapshot of the design and construction schedule for the project, as it will be shown on the 2021 IDS schedule once it's complete. For anyone who isn't familiar with the IDS schedule or its symbology, I just kind of want to point out that the dotted lines you'll see represent the design phase of the project. The solid lines represent construction, and the diamond pattern represents the operational testing and monitoring period, or OTMP for short.
You have a laser pointer?
Black symbology here represents the federal responsibility, while blue represents the state's responsibility. So although the district is taking the lead on design and construction of the Lox River project, our efforts will be coordinated closely with our federal partners at the Corps. So from the schedule, you'll notice that the project design is set to begin in Flowway 3 during fiscal year 2022, and design of Flowway 1 and 2 components are scheduled to begin in fiscal year 23. Construction will occur between 2023 and 2029, and the OTMP period is scheduled to begin in 2028 and will conclude in 2031. Most of the real estate acquisition for the project is complete. However, some acquisition of land, canals, and easements still remains in the northern portion of the project area. As Sky mentioned, there will be a link at the end of the presentation that will take you to the PIR, and you can find that on the Army Corps' webpage for the project. That concludes my portion of the presentation today, and I look forward to working with you all to bring this much-needed restoration project to fruition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. This excellent overview of this important SERP project. Our next agenda item was going to be the aquifer storage and recovery component of this project, and Mr. Bob Verastro will present that now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Bob Verastro. I've been with the ASR program now at the district, working on a variety of the various SERP ASR programs. So just to keep everyone on the same sort of concept here, ASR is the idea that we can store water underground in a confined aquifer. And what we do to do this is to utilize wells that we can pump fresh water into, typically a brackish water aquifer. And we pump water into the aquifer and create what we call a bubble of stored fresh water within the aquifer. It pushes away the native groundwater that's in the aquifer already. And we call that bubble of fresh water a target storage volume. And then we utilize the same well to pump out of the aquifer to recover water that would otherwise not be available from the surface system. So we use essentially bi-directional wells to pump into and out of the aquifer to store much larger volumes of water than would otherwise be available from a typical surface water storage feature. Next slide. So the idea of utilizing aquifers, what we are, our target storage area for utilizing ASR is the upper Floridan aquifer in this area of the C18 West Reservoir. And the aquifer, the Floridan aquifer, is going to be somewhere between 800 and 1,000 feet below ground. It is confined by the overlying Hawthorne Formation, which is a very dense clay. And then the surface water, or the surface aquifer, is the water table aquifer that most people get their drinking water from in this area, which is from land surface maybe down to 100 or 200 feet. But the upper Floridan aquifer is the target horizon for ASR at this location. Next slide. So this is a conceptual design drawing of the C18 West Impoundment Reservoir. And on this schematic, you can see 4 ASR wells located on the western periphery of the impoundment. The wells themselves are separated from each other by about 1,000 feet. Our approximation is that the wells will be capable of pumping at 5 million gallons a day, which will be a combined capacity, pumping capacity of 20 million gallons per day, or an equivalent rate of 32 CFS. Again, the wells will be completed in the Floridan aquifer, and our modeling for the project performance assumes that a maximum freshwater bubble of about 30,000 acre feet of water would be stored underground in the Floridan aquifer. And just to note that the reservoir design has not yet been finalized. It is still somewhat conceptual. So the actual locations of the wells integral with the reservoir design has yet to be finalized. At this point, it's assumed that the wells will be on the western boundary of the reservoir. And another note is that a lot of the performance of ASR is really contingent upon the results of an exploratory well. And we have yet to construct a test well at this facility, but there is a lot of nearby well information that give us an optimistic viewpoint that the Floridan aquifer is available for ASR at this location. Next slide. Yeah, so this is a map of the surrounding wells that are available for informational purposes around the C18 West Reservoir. Just to the north of the reservoir, Pratt & Whitney has constructed a deep injection well system many, many years ago. They did penetrate the Floridan aquifer. It is transmissive and water-bearing at that location at a depth of about 800 feet. Moving clockwise to the east and northeast, there are a couple of well fields, supply well fields from the Floridan aquifer at Jupiter, Tequesta, and Seacoast Utility. But there's also a test ASR well that was completed along the C18 canal by the Department of Natural Resources. And that well was a very successful short-term test of the concept of ASR at that location. Moving clockwise down, Seacoast Utility has a Floridan aquifer well field And then Seacoast Utility also has constructed a deep injection well where we have good information about the aspects of the Floridan aquifer. Moving to the south, the city of West Palm Beach has an ASR system that's completed in a highly transmissive zone in the Floridan aquifer at their West Palm Beach water treatment plant. And then moving over to the west, Royal Palm Beach has a deep injection well that encountered the Floridan aquifer transmissively. And then continuing west at the FP&L facility, South Florida Water Management has constructed a 3-zone monitor test well system at PBF 15 that encountered numerous transmissive zones in the Floridan aquifer. And then further off to the west, US Sugar constructed a test ASR well that also encountered very, very favorable aquifer characteristics that indicate that ASR is certainly conceivable at the C18 West location. So in order to estimate the effects of ASR, one of the first things we could do is try to estimate what the size of the freshwater bubble would be about 1,000 feet underground. And this is a calculation that we've done using a standard method by Warner and Lair, estimating a cylindrical size of what a 30,000 acre foot bubble would look like, using an effective aquifer porosity of 20%, assuming a storage zone thickness of 200 feet, with a dispersion coefficient for trying to estimate the degree of diffusion that would occur within the aquifer. And that computation has resulted in a maximum radial distance of roughly 4,280 feet. And then the map on the right essentially shows how far that radial distance of that freshwater bubble would extend, assuming that the wells would be completed on the western edge of the reservoir. And as you can see, the majority of the bubble would be underneath the Corbett Wildlife Area Management Area on the west, and on the east, the other half of the bubble would be beneath the actual impoundment itself. The figure also includes some yellow crosses, which indicate where a monitor well would be located within the Floridan aquifer itself, so that we can monitor the water quality at the edge of where the impacted area would be, to assure that we would meet water quality compliance and regulatory standards while maintaining a bubble underneath the actual impoundment site itself. So another way to estimate the impacts of the operation of the ASR would be to run a groundwater model to estimate the degree of drawdown or head buildup within the aquifer itself as the 4 wells are pumping. And this is a fairly standard technique that we would use for anybody who would be applying for a water use permit for actually operating such a system. We used the groundwater flow model software called WindFlow to compute the 1-foot drawdown cone by operating 4 ASR wells on the western edge of the property using the Hand-Tush-Jacob method. We assumed very conservative aquifer parameters with a low leakance. Transmissivity, again, estimated from the Pratt and Whitney well, located just to the west of the site, and a 90-day continuous pumping indicated that the maximum of a 1-foot drawdown would occur at a distance of roughly 5,000 feet away from the project boundary. So we estimated that the bubble might extend roughly 4,000 feet from the edge of the boundary of the property, and a maximum 1 foot of drawdown would be induced roughly 5,000 feet away from the project boundary. Next slide. So another method of analysis that we could look at the actual formation of the bubble, the yellow circle on the map represents the bubble that would be underneath the site at a depth of about 1,000 feet underground. And all of the tiny little arrows, the gray arrows that you see are the vectors, the flow direction and velocity vectors that our three-dimensional East Coast Floridan aquifer model generated when we were looking at the lower East Coast water supply planning area. The Floridan model is a three-dimensional density-dependent model, calibrated and peer-reviewed. And the 2040 simulation indicated the actual groundwater flow direction would be to the east at a rate of roughly 10 feet per day. And that's, as you might imagine, because there really is no well pumping in the area of this impoundment, the groundwater flow direction and gradient is very, very slow in this area. So we're really quite confident that we can maintain the bubble and maintain water quality compliance by our monitoring, by the proposed monitoring program at this location. So the idea of trying to develop a protection of the bubble 1,000 feet underground is for us to essentially establish a 1 mile area around the boundary of the C18 reservoir that we could call a groundwater protection area. And this protection area would actually only be limited to the upper Floridan aquifer, where the actual bubble would be. And the idea would be that we would not want to have a well, nearby well, impinge upon the 1 mile buffer with a drawdown of any more than 1 foot. And we would not want to have use of a well that could impact the groundwater quality of the bubble underground. The idea also is that anyone who were to want to drill a well in the water table aquifer or the superficial aquifer is capable of doing that, because the actual groundwater protection area is only located at within the Floridan aquifer itself. And then anyone who were to actually conceptually want to drill a well, like a deep injection well into the boulder zone below the upper Floridan aquifer, they would also be able to do that. So the groundwater protection area is just a subsurface sort of prism of protection within the upper part of the Floridan aquifer. Next slide. And I think that's
Excellent.
That's it.
Well, very good. Thank you, Bob. That's an excellent overview of the ASR component and the modeling that's been done to support our draft rule language. And so with that, let's move to that agenda item. Again, my name is Sky Notestein with the Applied Sciences Bureau. So we're proposing amendment to Rule 40E-2.091 Florida Administrative Code. And this is specifically the part of publications incorporated by reference. We reference the applicant's handbook for water use permit applications within the South Florida Water Management District, otherwise known as the applicant's handbook. And we anticipate when this handbook is updated, we will replace the effective date and the web link that are listed in 40E-2. I'll also note for our draft rule language, strike-throughs indicate deletion and underlines indicate additions of text amendments. So with the applicant's handbook, section 1.1 includes definitions. And this is just one of those many definitions, but the only one we are proposing amendments to. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, the Lower East Coast Water Availability Rule references some water bodies, including the North Palm Beach County, Loxahatchee River watershed water bodies. We're proposing to amend the name of Grassy Waters Preserve to City of West Palm Beach Water Catchment Area, and then adding Hungryland Slough, Pine Glades, and the C18W Reservoir. We'll also show figure 3-2 in its current and proposed amended state in upcoming slides. Now, this slide is really for context. There are no amendments proposed for this text. There are no underlines or strike throughs, but this is 3.2.1 of the applicant's handbook, the restricted allocation areas. We have 6 existing RAAs that Jennifer Brown showed in her presentation. Subsection E is the lower East Coast regional water availability. And particularly what's important about this subsection is that it calls out that there is a recovery component to the northwest fork of the Loxahatchee River MFL, and it identifies some of these water bodies and the watershed and the permit renewal and modifications that are implied under this rule. Also, it's important to point out that integrated conveyance systems that are hydraulically connected to the subject water bodies and are tributary to or receive water from such water bodies, or water bodies used for water supply, but not limited to the central and southern Florida project canals and secondary and tertiary canals that derive water from primary canals. All right, moving on. This is the existing figure 3-2 in the applicant's handbook, and we're proposing to replace it. And this would be the amended revised figure. Now, in this format, the new areas that have been added are circled in yellow and also have a black and white dashed outline. There are approximately 3 locations in the northeast, along the center and the center east, where you can see these circles. And these are the portions of restricted allocation area that would be added. This is what the figure would look like in the applicant's handbook. The dashed outlines of the new areas and the yellow circles would not be shown. However, the name of the figure would remain the same. We also have some updates to the areas within these restricted boundaries, and the names have been updated to more clearly show where you're at and reflect proposed definition name changes. We are also proposing a new subsection to 3.2.1, tentatively listed as G, and tentatively named Utilization of the Upper Floridan Aquifer System near the C18W Reservoir. All this is proposed new text. Now, the following restrictions shall apply when allocating groundwater stored in the Upper Floridan Aquifer System, otherwise known as the Upper FAS, beneath the C18W Reservoir, as depicted in figure 3-4, which we'll show subsequently. This, as we've mentioned, this subsection is really key in implementing the district's objective of ensuring that water is protected and not allocated for other sources other than the restoration of the Loxahatchee River watershed and its associated SERP project. This subsection also reminds that the applicant shall provide reasonable assurance that the requested allocation will not withdraw from the portion of the upper FAS underlying the C18W Reservoir and its associated buffer zone delineated in figure 3-4. And this demonstration will be provided when the following 2 criteria are met. 1, the requested allocation will not interfere with the C18W Reservoir ASR wells as described in section 3.7 of the applicant's handbook below, or the requested allocation will not result in a 1 foot or more of drawdown to the portion of the upper FAS that underlies C18W Reservoir groundwater buffer zone delineated in figure 3-4. We also add, for existing legal users of the upper FAS as of when this rule effective date will be added, whose cone of depression intersects with the zone delineated in 3-4, use may be renewed. However, no additional allocations that increase the withdrawal's impact beyond that of the previously permitted use as of rule effective date will be authorized. This is our proposed figure. Should say figure 3-4. I'll correct that. And this is the one that Bob showed earlier. Again, its purpose is to help applicants of water use understand where this upper Floridan Aquifer System water is reserved. It is conceptualized that it would be a 1 mile buffer only in the upper Floridan Aquifer System, again, approximately 1,000 feet below land surface. To put that in context, there's strong confining layers that separate the upper superficial aquifer system, where most users are drawing water if they're not meeting their needs from public water supply. So this groundwater buffer zone or protection area would have no impact on those users. And likewise, if a user wanted to withdraw below or outside without interfering with our groundwater protection area, those uses would not be constrained either. The district in no way intends to prevent the Floridan aquifer from being utilized as an alternative water supply source as it currently is and is planned in the future. We also have some minor changes to section 3.7, which talk about interference with existing users. We've added the word uses instead of withdrawals so that we can better protect the ASR bubble. And then added the word those, just those within the cone of influence is what we're talking about. Made a minor change definition of interference with and existing legal use. And then in the subsections of 3.7.2, there's no change except for moving where the or is to join a new subsection E and associated punctuation. Subsection E of 3.7.2 is new, and it preliminarily reads, if the existing legal use is an ASR system, one, the transmittance of ASR waters away from the delineated project area by changing or accelerating the flow velocity or flow direction, or two, a change in the concentration of total dissolved solids. Those are included as additional interference. Next, in 3.7.3, it's mitigation requirements for interference with existing legal uses. Majority of this language is existing. We have added a sentence to it that reads, if the existing legal use is an ASR system, replacement of the impacted user's equipment shall not be included in the mitigation plan. Conceptually, what this means is that if interference was predicted in modeling or observed, it could require the interfering party to replace equipment or provide alternative water supplies. In other words, if you were domestic self-supplied, you could hook up to a public water supply if it was available. However, with ASR systems, there's really not an alternative, and this language is meant to protect those ASR systems without requiring replacement. Okay, that is my component of the draft rule language. And again, these proposed amendments to the applicant's handbook and 40E-2 are on our rules webpage. We're now going to switch over to the public comment period. We're going to utilize, since this is a virtual session, and to help clarify questions and answers provided from attendees, the Q&A or question and answer feature in Zoom. So if you're logged on with your Zoom app, this is one of the submenus available. And we ask that if you have a question or a comment, that you include your name, and if you have an affiliation or a relevant agenda item or speaker that your comment or question is addressed to, please include that. Let's start with taking any written questions, and we will attempt to answer them on the spot. And then after the conclusion of questions or comments that come in on our Q&A feature, if we have Zoom participants that are purely participating by phone or unable to type, we'll switch to that. And just as a reminder, if you wish to use that feature, *9 will raise your hand and *6 will unmute or mute you. Also going to get some assistance from my coworker, Natalie Kraft. Natalie, are there any questions that we've received at this time?
Hi, Scott. Thank you. We've received one so far from Daryl Graziani. It appears that the regulations are only proposing to protect existing ASR systems. How will the regulations protect the Grassy Waters Preserve from excessive withdrawals to charge the proposed new ASR system?
Okay, well, I'm going to take shot at this answer, and we are proposing amendments because we do not have restricted allocation areas for the upper Floridan aquifer, and that's the zone where the SERP project's ASR wells would store water. We need to add something that protects ASR storage. That's why the new subsection G of the applicant's handbook is being proposed. Other surface water features and superficial aquifer interactions are already protected through the existing restricted allocation area under the lower East Coast Regional Water Availability Rule. That's subsection E of 3.2.1. Grassy Waters Preserve was an existing water body feature identified in that existing rule. So its protections remain and are not changing. However, do we have other staff that wish to comment or provide additional clarity?
I would only add, this is Bob Verastro. I would only add that, operation of the ASR wells will only be limited to the upper portion of the Floridan aquifer, and the hydrogeologic information that we do have from the many wells that surround the C18 West Reservoir have all indicated that the Hawthorne confining unit is very thick and dense lime clay, roughly 500 feet thick. So any operation of the ASR well should have no impact on the surface features, such as in Grassy Waters Preserve itself. And all of that will be confirmed ultimately when an exploratory test well is constructed at the site to determine the ultimate operation of the safe operation of the ASR wells with minimal or no impact to the surface system.
Okay, great. Thank you guys for answering. We have a couple more questions that have come in. The first would be from an anonymous attendee. Says most people familiar with SERP are used to water reservations. Can you please clarify why a water reservation approach is not being pursued here?
Okay, so as several of our previous presenters showed on their slides, the Water Resources Development Act of 2000 does require that water is protected for SERP projects. And the district has a history of using two mechanisms, both water reservations and sometimes both, restricted allocation areas. Either acceptable, both from the state and federal perspective. I will say that there are previous, let's say 2006 water supply plan updates for the lower East Coast that prescriptively mention what might be done in the future related to MFLs on the northwest fork of the Loxahatchee River and perhaps water reservations. Those plans were well-intentioned when the time they were written. However, in the intervening years, as the project has evolved, as economies have changed and agency and executive leadership at our state level have changed, we've had to modify our course while still achieving our objective, which is protect the water resources made available by the SERP project. And it is my feeling that restricted allocation areas are both an acceptable and adequate protection for this project.
Okay, thank you, Sky. The next question is from Edward Delaport. I'm an attorney from representing the city of West Palm Beach. The city would prefer that the district use the term Grassy Waters Preserve instead of the water catchment area. The area shown in figure 3.2 is bigger than the limits of the water catchment area. Also, the city understands the protection of wetlands within Grassy Waters Preserve was one of the metrics for this project. I'll send that one to Jennifer and Brianna.
Sure, we'll note the preference and convey it up to the team.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Next is from Don McDowell, looking to the question for Jeff Buck and the Everglades group. Nice presentation, Jeff. Seems like one of the critical things needed for construction to stay on schedule is congressional appropriation to fund this project. When is that congressional appropriation anticipated? Leslie, would you like to answer?
Sure, I can do that. This is Leslie Wall. Good morning, everybody. And I'm the section administrator for the Ecosystem Restoration and Planning section here at the Water Management District. And Dawn, just to address your question, so this project, the Loxahatchee project, if you look on the IDS, the Integrated Delivery Schedule, it is going to be the South Florida Water Management District that's taking the lead on design and construction of these features. So it'll actually be state funding that will construct all of the Loxahatchee features, and it'll go on our side of the 50-50 cost ledger. So we're not awaiting state appropriations to construct. We're just awaiting the proper paperwork, I guess you could say. We're in the design phase, but we are working with the federal partner to get that project partnership agreement that we mentioned in the presentation earlier, which then we'll go to construction after that, but it'll be state funding that'll be used to construct.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leslie. We do not currently have any other written questions in the Q&A. I'll keep it open, but if anyone is participating via phone and would prefer to raise their hand at this time, we'll watch for raised hands and we can allow you to unmute them and share your comment or question. Okay, we do have one raised hand from Chip Block. Henry, can you please unmute him? And Chip, when you're ready, go ahead and unmute yourself using star.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Chip Block, I'm the Vice Mayor of Jupiter in my colony and Chairman of the Palm Beach County Water Resources Task Force. Just clarification on the last answer. Does that mean that the state is going to bear upfront the entire cost of constructing the C18 reservoir and then wait for the feds to appropriate the money for their 50%? Thank you.
Sure, this is Leslie again. I can address that question. So how the cost share ledger works for SERP, the 50-50 cost share is whatever, let me see if I can explain it. So the SERP projects, right, either the federal government has the lead on, the Corps has the lead on design and construction, or the state will have the lead on design and construction. And whichever features that we build, all that money that we spend on that feature goes on our side of the cost ledger. And then that ledger, that cost share ledger, just needs to stay 50-50. So we spend total half the money and the Corps would spend total half the money. Each feature is not split 50-50, if that makes sense. So yes, we would be paying for all the features of the Loxahatchee project, and all of that money would then go on our side of the cost ledger. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Leslie. We do have another hand raised. It is a phone number. I can't give you a name just yet, but it will be, you can have the ability to unmute yourself. The phone number ends in 1893. You can use *6 to unmute yourself. We can't hear you yet. Still not hearing anything from the muting. It does look like you are unmuted now. I'm so sorry, we can't hear you. If possible,
Can you hear me
could you
now?
type your question. Ah, hello. Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. This is Patrick Painter from the city of West Palm Beach. I just have a question. We've kind of missed, where are you getting the water to fill this reservoir? And how much of that water is diversion from water that would normally enter into the L8 basin?
Okay, I'm sorry. It was a little low on my end. I think you were asking where the water is coming from and is to fill the C18 West Reservoir?
No, the Mecca Reservoir, this diversion reservoir that you're constructing at Mecca right now. Where is that water?
Okay.
Where's its origin? And how much of that is diverted from water that would otherwise enter into the L8 basin?
Okay. Beth, do you want to take that question?
Yes, sorry about that. This is Beth Kavinsky. So Pat, most of the water comes from three sources to fill the reservoir. It comes from excess water in the C18 basin, C18 West Basin, excess water from Corbett, and then also from excess water in the Indian Trail Improvement District from the MO Canal. And as none of that water is from the L8 basin. Over. Does that answer your question?
So none of that flows presently into the L8 conveyance canal.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Beth. We do have another question in the Q&A feature. This is from Terry Bates. I'm not quite clear on the answer of why a restricted allocation rule versus SERP project reservation. Sounded like an agency preference. Restricted allocation has been used in the past when it was not feasible to quantify water for fish and wildlife. With physical SERP project features, water quantification from the project can be determined. Did you consider a combination of SERP project reservation to work in tandem with restricted allocation area rules for the various first water body features? Jennifer, would you like to answer that question?
Sure thing. Yeah, so we actually did really think quite long and hard about doing a reservation versus just consumptive use permitting rules. And especially for the ASR component, the statute says that, you know, the water reservation is limited to that fish and wildlife need. And we know from ASR that there might be some lost, some gained, and we really won't know for sure until we actually develop it. And so the other consideration was the desire to ensure existing legal uses are protected. We know that drilling a Floridan well is not an inexpensive proposition. It's actually, and once that infrastructure is installed, the district protects it unless it's contrary to the public interest. And so we knew that, you know, once a Floridan well would go in, that the district would have to deal with it and potentially modify its operations of the ASR and potentially not achieve the full benefits of the SERP ASR. So We figured amending the existing rules on ASR, on interference, and including a buffer area was the best thing to do. Generally, you correctly noted that just having a water reservation is really not sufficient. One of the conditions for issuance that's contained in 40E2, specifically 42.301, prohibits applicants from withdrawing reserved water. And so this district adopts implementing rules to clarify how an applicant demonstrates they're not withdrawing reserved water. And so we're doing rules anyway. And so that was the district's thought process. Again, not doing unnecessary duplicative rule. We have the LEC rule on the books, and then that's preventing additional withdrawals on the regional system. And so applicants have already, for the most part, complied with those rules, especially including applicants or potential applicants and permittees in the area where we are adding. And so we figured rather than creating new rules or redundant rules, this was the best way to go, both for expanding the definition of the Loxahatchee River watershed water bodies and the ASR protections.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. At this time, we don't have anything further in the Q&A and there are no hands raised. I'll give it another minute or so, let anyone come in, and then we can move to the next agenda. Okay, I'm not seeing anything further at this stage. Sai, you can go ahead and move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalie, and thank you attendees that provided question or comment. We appreciate that and we hear it. Going to move on to our remaining and last agenda items. That's the next steps. I'm just going to reiterate that our agenda from today's workshop, our draft technical document, and draft rule language are all available at our external public webpage. Here's the address, sfwmd.gov/rules. You'll see links to each, and as soon as IT can post it, I'll have a PDF of today's presentation available as well. We're continuing to solicit and encourage comments. Written comments can be provided in the meantime to Ms. Natalie Kraft. Her email is shown there. And we respectfully request that comments are received by February 7th, 2022. This will allow us to address and incorporate received comments ahead of our second workshop on February 22nd. Also, as many of you know that have worked with the district's web board will be utilized to show received comments. We will post them at our address shown there, sfwmd.websitetoolbox.com. And then if you go to that site, you'll scroll down for the topic associated with the Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project and associated rulemaking. To reiterate, we are on an aggressive schedule to try and confect a more important SERP project. So to remind, there will be a second workshop, and this is the second of two planned, February 22nd, also at 10 a.m. And just like with this one, you'll register for a Zoom link. As Jennifer mentioned, we will go to the governing board with a request to proceed with the proposed rule and rule adoption planned for our April 14th governing board meeting. And that would mean an effective date of new rules sometime in summer of this calendar year. Want to leave attendees with this information. These are the links that you can go for the draft rulemaking documents. There's also the link for the U.S. Army Corps' Loxahatchee River Watershed Restoration Project webpage. Bless you. And then we are lucky enough, we have an Aquifer Storage and Recovery webpage, which consolidates a great deal of research and publications on ASR, both from the district, other state and federal investigation. We have a brief restricted allocation areas webpage. And then again, your stakeholder comments that we receive will be posted on our web board. Okay, with that, I want to thank all attendees, thank district staff for their presentations and thoughtful answers to questions. This meeting is now adjourned.